Hey guys, tonight we begin in the fading light of a dying empire. The year is 1491, and you're standing on the ramparts of Granada, the last Muslim kingdom in Spain. The air is thin and cold, carrying the scent of orange blossoms and gunpowder. From the snowy peaks of the Sierra Nevada, you can see the Christian armies camped below, their fires stretching for miles across the plain like stars fallen to earth. Behind you, the Alhambra glows faintly in the dusk, red stone and shadow, its arabesques catching the last gold of the sun. You probably won't survive this one. But then again, neither did the empire you're standing in. Before we dive in, take a breath. Subscribe if you love stories where worlds end beautifully, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Tonight, history burns at midnight. You turn toward the city and hear the call to prayer drifting from the minarets, soft and defiant. The sound mingles with the clatter of hooves and the distant echo of Christian trumpets from the plain below. Granada, once the crown of Al-Andalus, now trembles between two eternities, the echo of Islamic Spain's brilliance and the shadow of Christian Spain's rise. For nearly 8 centuries, Muslim dynasties had ruled here, Umayyads, Almoravids, Almohads, leaving behind cities of science, poetry and light. Cordoba's libraries once held more books than all of medieval Europe. Seville's towers mirrored the desert minarets of Morocco. And Granada, oh Granada, was the last and loveliest, a city of marble courtyards, whispering fountains and gardens where water spoke in geometry. It was the jewel that outlasted all its sisters. But beauty cannot defend a kingdom. By the late 15th century, the Reconquista, the long Christian crusade to reclaim Iberia, had devoured nearly everything. Castile and Aragon, once divided, now stood united under Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs. Their marriage was more than love or politics, it was destiny forged in faith. Together they vowed to erase Islam from Spain once and for all, not as conquerors, but as purifiers. Granada, hemmed in by mountains and history, stood as the final flickering light of the Muslim world in Europe. The Nasrid sultans ruled it with grace, but also fear. Puppet kings paying tribute to their enemies to survive. Its palaces shone, but its armies dwindled. Its poets still sang, but the verses had turned melancholy. "We are," one wrote, "the roses of a garden that no one will water again." As night deepens, the glow of the Christian campfires illuminates the horizon. The soldiers of Castile chant prayers beneath wooden crosses, sharpening their swords for a war they call holy. Inside the Alhambra, courtiers whisper, nobles plot, and the young Sultan Muhammad XII, Boabdil as the Christians call him, paces alone beneath carved ceilings that shimmer like constellations. He's inherited a city of beauty, but also of debt and betrayal. Outside the palace, the people still believe. In the tea houses of the Albaycin, men murmur that Allah will not abandon them. In the shadowed markets, women hang amulets against the evil eye. But the old faith feels fragile now, like calligraphy, fading on damp paper. Even the fountains of the Alhambra seem to whisper slower, as if exhausted. Below, on the Vega plain, the Crusader artillery gleams under the moon. New weapons for a new world. Bronze cannons that roar louder than thunder, invented by Italians, financed by bankers, blessed by Rome. The age of swords and sieges has ended. The age of gunpowder has begun. Granada's walls, centuries old, have never faced this kind of enemy. The defenders know it. The city's poets write their last lines. The soldiers sharpen dull blades. The muezzin's call trembles in the night air, half prayer, half farewell. This is not just the fall of a city. It's the closing of an age, the final breath of Muslim Spain, the last verse of a long, beautiful poem written in stone and water. And as dawn rises, the red fortress of the Alhambra stands against the coming storm, proud, fragile, and unbearably human. The sun climbs over the Sierra Nevada, painting the white walls of Granada in soft gold. The city stirs awake under the weight of beauty and dread. You walk through its narrow streets, a maze of jasmine-scented courtyards, arched doorways, and fountains whispering secrets in Arabic. The sound of water is everywhere here. It threads through the city like breath. The people of Granada have always said that as long as the fountains run, Allah still remembers them. Inside the Alhambra, the Nasrid court still performs its rituals of grace. Servants glide silently with trays of almonds and honeyed dates, scribes sharpen pens of reed, and poets recite verses to distract from the echo of cannon fire far in the distance. The palace remains a dream carved in stone, walls inscribed with flowing calligraphy that reads, "There is no conqueror but God." Yet even those words now feel like prophecy trembling under siege. Granada, the last outpost of Al-Andalus, has become a paradox, a city of peace surrounded by war. It lives in two worlds, one of scholars and silk merchants, and another of starving soldiers and smoke. Its rulers, the Nasrids, trace their line to noble Arabian ancestors, but their throne is held together by diplomacy more than devotion. For decades they've survived by paying tribute to Castile, a humiliating bargain that buys time and little else. The current Sultan, Abul Hassan Ali, known to the Christians as Muley Hassan, was once strong and feared. His eyes burned like flint, his armies swift as falcons. But power here is slippery, and even kings must share their crowns with poets and ghosts. The palace whispers with intrigue. Advisors feud, generals sulk, and in the women's quarters, rival queens vie for influence. Among them is Iqsa al-Hora, proud, clever, and fiercely loyal to her son Muhammad, known as Boabdil. She watches as her husband, Muley Hassan, grows old and brutal, favouring his younger wife, the Christian-born Zoraia to the locals. The jealousy festers into politics. The royal family divides itself along lines of love and betrayal, even as the enemy gathers beyond the hills. Boabdil, delicate and hesitant, has spent his life under the shadow of these rivalries. To his mother, he is destiny's rightful heir, the one who will restore honour to Granada. To his father, he is a dreamer unfit to rule, and to the people, he's simply the prince who reads too much and fights too little. But history, as always, has other plans. In the year 1482, a spark ignites the fuse. Muley Hassan, desperate to assert power, stops paying tribute to Castile, an act of pride that feels noble but is fatal. Ferdinand and Isabella, newly united as the Catholic monarchs, see their moment. For them, the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to reclaim Iberia for Christianity, is more than war. It's salvation, duty, prophecy. They gather their armies, knights from Aragon, footmen from Castile, mercenaries from Italy, gunners from Flanders, and above their banners shines the cross. For the first time, the fractured Christian kingdoms march as one. The first blow falls on the border town of Zahara. It's small, defenceless, and Christian. Until one winter night when Muslim raiders from Granada, acting on the Sultan's orders, scale its walls. They burn, plunder, and vanish into the mountains. To the Christians, it's sacrilege. To Ferdinand and Isabella, it's justification. Within weeks, the crusade is declared. The bells of Seville ring for war. Priests preach vengeance from pulpits. Nobles rush to raise their banners. Even the Pope in Rome sends blessing and coin. What had been a border feud becomes a holy cause, a final cleansing of the Iberian Peninsula. Granada's poets mourn even as the people cheer. The Christians come, they write, like a tide that cannot be turned, and we are the sand. Inside the Alhambra, Iqsa al-Hora sees the storm approaching. Her husband, Muley Hassan, rallies his armies, but age and arrogance blind him. When he loses the key fortress of Alhambra in a surprise attack, his reputation collapses overnight. The city begins to turn against him, and in that weakness, Iqsa strikes. She conspires with loyal generals and helps her son Boabdil seize the throne. Muley Hassan, betrayed by his own blood, flees into exile. The kingdom fractures into three, father, son, and uncle, each claiming to be sultan, while Ferdinand and Isabella watch with delight. Granada, once united by faith and beauty, is now divided by pride. And division, in history, is just another word for surrender. Outside the city walls, the Christian armies march closer, their cannons dragging behind them like the judgment of God. Inside, the fountains still sing, but even the water sounds worried. The year is 1483, and Spain is no longer a mosaic of quarrelling kingdoms. It's becoming something new, something unified by steel, faith, and fire. You stand at the borderlands of Andalusia, where banners bearing the twin crowns of Castile and Aragon ripple in the mountain wind. The world has changed overnight. Where once knights rode for glory or coin, now they march for God. At the centre of it all are two people whose ambition burns hotter than the sun: Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, Los Reyes Católicos, the Catholic monarchs. Together, they are the architects of a new Spain, the founders of something that will outlive even them. But before they build, they must erase. Their marriage, once a gamble of love and politics, has become a crusade. Ferdinand is the sword, shrewd, relentless, disciplined. Isabella is the soul, devout, visionary, and merciless in her conviction. Together they speak of divine destiny, of purifying the land from infidel corruption. But behind the pious speeches lies pure strategy. They know that Granada, isolated and divided, is the perfect target, the last jewel needed to complete the crown of Spain. Isabella, sitting in her chapel at Córdoba, writes letters in her elegant, deliberate hand. God has granted us victory over the enemies of Christ, she declares. We will not rest until all Spain is united in one faith. She finances this vision by any means necessary: taxes, loans, and the eager gold of merchants who smell profit in conquest. Even the Church, never one to miss an opportunity, pours blessings and coin into the cause. Meanwhile, Ferdinand turns war into science. He modernizes the army, a rarity in medieval Europe. Gone are the days of reckless cavalry charges and duels of honour. His soldiers march in organised ranks, wielding pikes and early firearms. He trains engineers to build portable bridges and siege machines. He turns faith into logistics, and the results come swiftly. Town after town falls. Ronda, Loja, and Vélez Malaga, names that once shimmered with Arabic poetry, are now written in Latin on military maps. Ferdinand doesn't just conquer, he repopulates. Every captured city is refilled with Christians, its mosques turned into churches, its libraries burned or confiscated. But victory isn't just forged in battle, it's built in patience. Ferdinand wages war like a chess master, cutting off Granada's food, trade, and hope one piece at a time. Inside the Alhambra, Boabdil feels the noose tightening. He's no longer the poetic prince of his youth. He's a sultan in a gilded cage. His own uncle, Al-Zagal, holds the eastern part of the kingdom and refuses to yield loyalty. Muley Hassan, his father, still controls the mountain fortresses. Granada is now 3 thrones in one crumbling palace. Boabdil tries to strike back. He gathers what troops he can, veterans, mercenaries, desperate men. They ride north to reclaim lost towns, but Ferdinand's new army is a machine, not a mob. Outside Lucena, Boabdil's forces are crushed. He's captured, a sultan turned prisoner, a king paraded in chains. When he's brought before Ferdinand, the Catholic king doesn't gloat. He smiles, cool and calculating, and says, "We have no need for your death, only your obedience." Boabdil's ransom is strange. Freedom in exchange for betrayal. Ferdinand releases him, but only if he'll sow discord within Granada. The deal works. When Boabdil returns home, his people greet him as a hero, never knowing he's already signed the city's death warrant. From that moment on, Granada bleeds slowly. Civil war rages in the hills, families flee to North Africa. The court poets, once full of metaphors and music, now write dirges. "We have become," one writes, "like birds who sing in a burning forest." Ferdinand and Isabella, watching from their new encampment at Jaén, no time is on their side. Their armies build permanent bases in conquered towns. Their engineers construct roads for supply lines. Every step, every fortress is a measured breath toward inevitability. By 1486, they have built something the world has never seen before, a modern military campaign run by paperwork, precision, and faith. Isabella personally visits the front dressed in armour, commanding soldiers, earning devotion. She prays in the mud before battle, a queen wrapped in steel. The soldiers call her La Reina de la Cruz, the Queen of the Cross. Ferdinand, ever the tactician, calls her something else, the Heart of Spain. Together they bring not just an army, but an idea that Spain is destined to be one faith, one king, one voice. And Granada, glowing red under the setting sun, is the last note of a melody that's almost over. Within its walls the people sense the closing in. The fountains still sing, but now they sound like farewells. The market's still open, but the merchants whisper of evacuation. Even the stars above the Alhambra seem dimmer, as if heaven itself knows the story's end. The Catholic monarchs look south from their campfires and see the city's lights flicker. Ferdinand says quietly, "We'll take it by winter." Isabella replies, "Then let God have his will." The Reconquista, 8 centuries long, is about to end, and the last chapter will not be written with ink, but with fire. The spring of 1487 arrives heavy with dust and omens. Across Andalusia, the orange trees bloom early, their scent mingling with the smoke of burning villages. From Seville to Córdoba, the bells of every church toll in rhythm, a nation announcing the final act of a centuries-long crusade. You stand on a hill overlooking the Vega of Granada, watching the slow march of history and armour and banners. For years, the frontier between Christian and Muslim Spain had been drawn not on maps, but on memory. 1,000 fortified hills, olive groves, and blood-soaked rivers. But now the line is closing, and the only barrier left is Granada itself. Inside the Alhambra, the Nasrid court still pretends life continues as before. Poets recite, fountains murmur, courtiers whisper about divine favour. Yet everyone feels the earth shifting beneath their feet. Boabdil, the reluctant sultan, rules half a kingdom with half a heart. The civil war he sparked to reclaim the throne has gutted Granada's strength. His uncle, Al-Zagal, clings to the eastern cities, Guadix and Almeria, claiming divine right. His father, Muli Hassan, old and sick, still refuses to bless his son's rule. It is a kingdom divided against itself, each faction praying to the same god for victory over the other. Meanwhile, the Catholic monarchs are patient hunters. Ferdinand moves his armies south, one fortress at a time, like tightening a chain. Malaga, the great coastal city, is his next prize. Its port feeds Granada, its ships bring weapons and hope from North Africa. Without it, the Nasrid kingdom will choke. The siege of Malaga begins in April. Ferdinand brings not only knights and cannons but engineers, carpenters, even scribes to record every detail. It's not a campaign, it's administration by destruction. The city's defenders fight fiercely, led by Hamid al-Zahal, a warrior whose loyalty to Granada burns brighter than the palace torches. For 6 months the Christians pound the walls with cannon fire, filling the air with dust and thunder. Starvation does the rest. When Malaga finally falls in August, the punishment is brutal. Every man captured is enslaved, every woman and child sold. It is a warning written in human cost, the price of resistance. The news spreads through Al-Andalus like wildfire. In the cafes of Granada, men lower their voices when speaking of it. Mothers tell their sons not to talk of war. Boabdil understands the message. His council begs him to surrender the coastal cities before they suffer the same fate. But pride is an ancient inheritance in Granada. Better to die with honour than live in shame, one general declares. The court applauds, but no one truly believes it. Ferdinand's war machine rolls on. Almeria, Barca, Guadix. Each falls in turn. The Christian camps are like moving cities, soldiers, priests, cooks, blacksmiths, even confessors for the dying. Isabella rides among them in a white cloak embroidered with a crimson cross, her presence as much a weapon as any cannon. She prays over the wounded, signs decrees, and keeps ledgers of provisions. Faith, discipline, and bureaucracy. This is conquest perfected. Within the Alhambra, Boabdil walks the halls his ancestors built, mosaics of gold and turquoise, ceilings carved like constellations. The words, "There is no conqueror but God," shimmer on every wall, mocking and comforting in equal measure. He stares at the fountains where the water still flows endlessly, wondering if the city's beauty has made its people forget how to fight. Outside, the refugees pour in. Peasants from Ronda, nobles from Baza, scholars clutching scrolls instead of swords. Granada becomes a cage of glittering desperation. The markets overflow with the displaced, and prices climb higher than courage. Bread becomes rare, hope rarer still. Boabdil sends envoys north, begging the sultans of North Africa for help. The messengers sail from Al-Munyekar and vanish into the horizon. None return. Across the sea, the great Muslim powers are busy fighting each other, or too far away to care. The last kingdom of Islam in Europe stands utterly alone. One evening, Boabdil climbs the Tower of Comares and looks out over his city. The domes, the cypress trees, the distant fields glowing red in the sunset. He knows Ferdinand will come for him next. And though fear grips him, another feeling lingers too, the weight of inheritance. He was born into the twilight of a civilization. All he can do is decide how it ends. Far below, in the Christian camp, Ferdinand studies his maps by candlelight. Granada will fall, he says quietly to Isabella. The only question is how many prayers it will take. The Queen closes her eyes. Then we shall pray until the walls themselves whisper Amen. The line between faith and conquest is about to vanish, and with it, the last light of Muslim Spain. The year is 1488, and the walls of Granada seem to hold their breath. You walk through the Albaycin, the city's oldest quarter, where narrow streets twist like veins through whitewashed houses. Children chase each other past shuttered windows, their laughter too loud for a city at war. Every fountain still runs, every garden still blooms. But beneath the jasmine and orange blossoms, fear has taken root. Boabdil, the Sultan of Granada, sits on a throne that feels colder each day. The Alhambra glows as beautifully as ever, a palace of water and light, but its courtyards now echo with the sound of arguments instead of poetry. Advisors whisper conflicting counsel. Generals beg for reinforcements that no longer exist. Poets write verses of defiance, though even their ink smells of resignation. In the palace's Hall of the Ambassadors, Boabdil holds court under a dome carved to resemble the heavens. 8,000 tiny stars, each one flickering in lamplight. The hall was built to remind sultans of their divine duty. Tonight, it only reminds him how small one man can feel beneath eternity. He listens as his council debates the impossible, how to hold the last kingdom of Islam against the united might of Spain. His mother, Aixa al-Hora, still fierce in her widowhood, leans close to him. "They come not for land, my son," she says. "They come for souls." You cannot reason with fire, but Boabdil is tired of fire. He dreams of compromise, of coexistence. He remembers the treaties of Cordoba and Seville, the years when Christians and Muslims traded more goods than blows. "Perhaps Ferdinand will spare us if we submit," he says softly. His mother's gaze hardens. Submit, and you lose your throne. Resist, and you may lose your head. But only one of those paths keeps your dignity. Outside the Alhambra's gates, the Christian armies draw nearer. Ferdinand's forces have taken Guadix, Almeria, and Baza. Each victory tightens the circle. Granada's mountains, once a natural fortress, now trap it like a coffin. Supplies run thin. Horses are slaughtered for meat. The once rich markets of silk and spice now barter for bread. And still, the people endure. In the mosques, the imams preach patience. In the tea houses, old men tell stories of when the Umayyads ruled from Cordoba to the Pyrenees, when the call to prayer echoed across Europe. It was not strength that built Al-Andalus, one of them says, but knowledge. And it is ignorance that destroyed it. The younger listeners nod but glance nervously at the horizon, where Christian fires glow brighter each night. Boabdil sends envoys to Ferdinand, offering tribute in exchange for peace. The Catholic monarchs smile and send back polite refusals. They have no interest in tribute. They want the city. They want the cross raised over the Alhambra. They want to end 8 centuries of history with one ceremony. Ferdinand and Isabella's encampment has become a city of its own. Rows of tents laid out with military precision, a chapel at its heart, and a wooden palace built for the Queen. They name it Santa Fe, the city of holy faith. Even its name is a message. They have come not as conquerors, but as instruments of God. One night, as rain beats softly on the palace roof, Isabella studies a map of Granada illuminated by candlelight. "Look," she tells Ferdinand. "It is shaped like a heart." Her husband smiles grimly. "Then we must pierce it cleanly." By summer, the heart begins to bleed. Boabdil's soldiers hold the mountain passes, but Ferdinand has learned patience from his long war. He cuts off trade routes, poisons wells, blocks the rivers that feed Granada's orchards. The same water that once symbolized paradise now becomes the city's torment. The people begin to starve. Bread disappears. Families boil weeds and roots for soup. The markets grow silent. The fountains still run, miraculously, mockingly, but they no longer sound like music. They sound like countdowns. Boabdil climbs the ramparts often now. He looks out at the city and wonders what his ancestors would think of him. The last Nasrid, presiding not over victory but over survival. He prays in silence beneath the carved inscription that runs along the Alhambra's walls. "Wala ghalib illa Allah." There is no conqueror but God. The words once meant triumph. Now they sound like surrender. Meanwhile, the Christian armies build catapults and cannons at Santa Fe. The sound of hammering carries for miles, echoing through Granada's valleys. Isabella's carpenters construct wooden crosses taller than any minaret. When they're raised, they cast shadows that reach the city's walls by midday. The people of Granada wake each morning to those shadows, long, sharp, and unrelenting. Inside the palace, Boabdil's mother speaks one last time. "Remember, my son, a king's glory is not in how long he reigns, but in how he faces the end." Outside, the bells of Santa Fe toll for mass. Inside, the muezzins call the dawn prayer. The two sounds meet in the air over the Vega plain, the last duet of two worlds that will never sing together again. By 1490, Granada's once green valleys have turned grey with smoke. The Vega plain, once a patchwork of olive trees and pomegranate orchards, now lies scarred and silent beneath a winter sky. You stand on the Alhambra's highest terrace, the wind cold and sharp against your face, carrying the faint scent of ash from the Christian camp at Santa Fe. Below, thousands of tents stretch to the horizon, neat rows of faith and firepower. Boabdil watches it too, his eyes sunken but defiant. The young sultan is no longer the poet prince of legend. He's a survivor trapped in his own palace. He once dreamed of restoring Granada's glory, of uniting the Muslim world behind him. But those dreams have withered like the gardens below. His people still look to him for miracles, but even miracles need allies, and the world beyond the sea has turned its back. Across the Mediterranean, the mighty Mamluk sultans of Egypt and the Ottomans of Istanbul send sympathetic letters, but no ships, no soldiers, no gold. The age of crusades and caliphates has ended. This is the age of nation-states and cannons. Boabdil stands alone, the last shadow of an empire that once stretched across continents. He spends his nights pacing the Alhambra's courtyards. The fountains still flow, though the sound of water now feels like mockery, a paradise trapped in a cage. He runs his hand along the cool marble walls, tracing the inscriptions carved by ancestors who ruled in splendour. Rejoice in prosperity, for happiness endures not. The irony cuts deeper than any sword. Outside the walls, the Christian siege tightens like a vice. Ferdinand's generals, men of calculation rather than courage, build an iron ring around the city. They cut off every road, every stream, every whisper of hope. Patrols roam the mountains, intercepting merchants and deserters. Anyone caught smuggling food into Granada is hanged where all can see. In Santa Fe, Ferdinand and Isabella preside over their mobile court, a palace of tents draped in silk, guarded by pikes and prayers. Priests march through the camp carrying relics, blessing soldiers before every skirmish. Isabella oversees provisions personally, ensuring no soldier goes hungry. Ferdinand studies maps late into the night, marking weak points in Granada's walls, timing artillery barrages to the rhythm of prayer. They are the perfect union of devotion and discipline, faith sharpened into policy. Even their engineers see it as divine work. One of them writes home, "Every hammer stroke brings us closer to God's kingdom." Inside Granada, that same kingdom feels very far away. The mosques are full of supplicants, the streets of hunger. Children beg in alleys once lined with silk merchants. Families tear wood from their own homes to burn for warmth. The once proud nobles sell jewels for bread. The marble glow of the Alhambra dims beneath soot and silence. Boabdil gathers his remaining generals. They argue over whether to fight or surrender. His mother, Aixa al-Hora, sits quietly, her veil drawn low, her expression unreadable. "My son," she finally says, "you can fight and die like your ancestors, or you can kneel and live like their memory. Both are losses. Choose which one time will forgive." But Boabdil is not ready to surrender. He decides on one last gamble. If he can strike fast, a night raid on Santa Fe, a burst of courage to break the siege, perhaps he can bargain from strength. The attack begins under a moonless sky. The gates open silently, and riders thunder down from the Alhambra like ghosts, scimitars glinting in the dark. They reach the Christian lines, torching tents and shouting war cries that haven't echoed in centuries. For a moment it feels like the old days, fire and glory, a taste of vengeance. But Ferdinand's army is no feudal rabble. His sentries sound the alarm, his troops form ranks, and his cannons roar to life. By dawn, the Muslim riders are scattered or slain, their leader dragged back bleeding into Granada. The attempt has failed, and worse, it proves to Ferdinand that the city is desperate. He orders his cannons to begin their final work. For weeks, the sky above Granada flashes with fire. The ancient walls crack under bombardment. Towers collapse into clouds of marble dust. The people huddle in basements as the city shakes like an earthquake. Yet through it all, the muezzins still climb the minarets and call to prayer, their voices hoarse but unbroken. When the bombardment pauses, Boabdil walks the ramparts. The once splendid view, gardens, fields and snow-capped peaks, now stretches over ruin. He knows the end is close. The banners of Castile are visible even from here, red crosses gleaming in the morning sun. Inside Santa Fe, Ferdinand tells his queen, "The Moor's heart is breaking. It is time to offer peace." And Isabella nods, her voice calm as scripture. "Then let us end their story as we begin ours." Below, in the valley, an envoy rides toward the city gates carrying a white flag, not of mercy but of victory wrapped in diplomacy. Granada's last sultan waits in silence. The age of Andalusian twilight is almost over. The year turns to 1491, and the air over Granada feels heavy, as if even the wind has grown tired of the war. The snow on the Sierra Nevada gleams cruelly bright above the blackened hills, and the Christian camp of Santa Fe spreads beneath it like a wooden city of faith. From the Alhambra's towers you can see everything: the glitter of armour, the distant banners bearing the cross, the smoke curling from 1,000 cooking fires. The siege is not a battle anymore, it's a waiting game. Ferdinand and Isabella know it. So does Boabdil. Inside the Alhambra, the court survives on ritual more than hope. The fountains still pour, but the water is rationed. The muezzin still calls, though his voice cracks with hunger. In the streets below, people tear down shutters to use as firewood. Old men speak of miracles, but none come. The younger men speak of surrender, and their whispers echo louder each night. Boabdil spends long hours pacing the hall of the ambassadors. The ceiling above him glitters with 8,000 carved stars, symbols of divine order. But the stars outside have vanished behind siege smoke. The words along the walls repeat their promise. There is no conqueror but God. Once they were the city's boast. Now they sound like resignation. Every morning he meets with his mother, Aixa al-Hora, who still wears her widow's black and carries herself like a queen of a world that no longer exists. She listens as he reads the latest missives from Ferdinand, letters full of polite ultimatums and divine justifications. They write of peace, she says, but their pieces are silence. Beyond the walls, Santa Fe hums like a machine. Ferdinand has transformed his siege into administration. The tents are now tiled huts. The streets are paved. The churches ring with bells. It is a new city, order built from conquest, as though Spain itself is practicing empire. Priests lead processions before sunrise, blessing cannons and soldiers alike. Isabella walks among the troops, her white veil spotless even in the mud, handing out bread and rosaries. The soldiers kneel when she passes, whispering, "La Reina Santa." In Granada, famine deepens. Cats and dogs vanish from the streets. Mothers grind acorns into flour. The markets close. People begin to sell what little gold they have to buy a few days of food. Yet through all of it, the Alhambra remains heartbreakingly beautiful, a palace untouched by the world's decay. The contrast feels cruel, as if the walls themselves mock the suffering beyond them. Boabdil's councillors beg him to surrender. His generals threaten mutiny. Even the imams speak of endurance as a sin when it condemns the innocent to die. Still he hesitates. To yield is to betray centuries of pride. To fight is to slaughter his people for the sake of legend. Every choice is loss. Then, late one night, Ferdinand sends another messenger. This one carries a draft treaty, 39 articles promising protection, freedom of religion, and respect for property. The terms sound generous, almost merciful. Aixa reads it and says, "They give you promises because they already hold your soul." But Boabdil knows the truth. The city cannot last another month. He signs a secret letter, asking for parley. The next morning, under a white flag, envoys ride from the city gate toward Santa Fe. The Christians watch them descend the hill, their white robes bright against the winter soil. The negotiations begin in a tent between two worlds, the last Sultan of Al-Andalus and the first King and Queen of Spain sitting beneath the same canvas. Ferdinand speaks first, calm as a banker. "Surrender now, and your people shall live as before. Resist, and we will erase your name." Isabella says little, but her presence carries more weight than his words. Boabdil nods once. He asks for time to consult his council. The Queen's eyes meet his, steady and final. "Take what time remains to you, my lord." When he returns to Granada, the people know without being told. The city is silent except for the sound of weeping. Even the fountains seem to whisper slower, as if they too understand what is coming. Aixa al-Hora stands beside her son on the balcony of the Alhambra that night. Below them, the Christian camp glows like a sea of embers. She says, "When you give them the keys, do not tremble. A king may lose his kingdom, but he must never lose his composure." Boabdil nods, his jaw tight. "And when it is done?" he asks. "Then we will leave this paradise," she replies, "and remember it for the rest of our lives." Outside, the bells of Santa Fe toll the hour. Inside, the last king of Granada closes his eyes and prepares to end 800 years of Islamic Spain with a single gesture. Dawn, January 2nd, 1492. The morning the world changes, you stand beside Boabdil at the gate of the 7 floors, the great bronze key of Granada cold in his hand. The skies are pale gold washed with fog, the kind of dawn that feels too quiet to be real. The muezzin's call has faded. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. Below, on the Vega plain, the Christian army gleams like a field of swords under the rising sun. The Sultan wears white, the colour of mourning in his world, the colour of triumph in theirs. Around him, his mother Aixa al-Hora, a few loyal guards, and the city's judges stand in silence. They've already prayed. There's nothing left to ask for. A trumpet sounds from the plain. Ferdinand and Isabella approach on horseback, surrounded by banners, red for Aragon, gold for Castile, and above them both the silver cross of Christ. The drums fall silent. The two monarchs dismount, stepping forward across the frost-tipped grass. Behind them, priests carry crucifixes. Soldiers bow their heads as if witnessing a sacrament. Boabdil hesitates only once. His mother whispers, "Courage, my son." He rides forward, the key heavy in his palm, and stops before the conquerors. Ferdinand's face is calm, unreadable. Isabella's eyes gleam with a kind of terrible serenity. No one speaks. The air seems to thicken with the weight of centuries. 800 years of history balanced on a moment no longer than a breath. Finally, Boabdil dismounts. He bows slightly, not as a slave, but as a man acknowledging fate. Then with both hands he offers the key. "These are the keys to paradise," he says quietly. "Use them with mercy." Ferdinand accepts them without a word. Isabella crosses herself. A priest beside her murmurs a prayer, his Latin chanting rising into the cold air like smoke. The soldiers behind them shout, "Santiago!" their war cry since the days of the First Crusades. Trumpets blare, drums roll. From the towers of Granada, a slow transformation begins. The red banners of the Nasrids, embroidered with verses from the Quran, are lowered for the last time. In their place, the standard of Castile and Aragon rises, red, gold, and white. The cross of Christ gleams above the Alhambra. A cheer erupts from the Christian ranks, echoing across the valley like thunder. Inside the city, people watch in silence. Muslim families gather in courtyards, some weeping openly, others staring blankly as soldiers march through the gates. The conquerors keep their discipline. No looting, no slaughter. Isabella has ordered dignity and victory, but even mercy can feel like humiliation when it comes with chains of faith. Boabdil rides back through the gate of Elvira. The people bow their heads as he passes, not in salute, but in farewell. They know he is no longer their king. At the edge of the city, he pauses one last time to look at the Alhambra. The sun hits its walls, turning them to fire. He whispers something no one hears, then turns away. As the procession of exiles winds into the hills, his mother rides beside him, straight-backed and silent. Behind them, the city glows red under its new flag. At a ridge overlooking the valley, Boabdil stops again. He looks back. The domes, the towers, the river curling through the plain like a ribbon of light. His eyes fill, and he weeps. Aixa watches him for a moment, then says the words that history will never forget. "Do not weep like a woman for what you could not defend as a man." The sentence strikes like a sword. Boabdil lowers his head. He doesn't reply. Perhaps there is nothing left to say. They continue riding south toward the Alpujarras Mountains, toward exile. Behind them, Granada celebrates its own funeral. Priests consecrate the mosques into churches. Bells ring from towers where the call to prayer once echoed. The people of the city, Moors, Jews, converts, kneel under the gaze of soldiers and saints. A new order begins, righteous and absolute. That same afternoon, Ferdinand and Isabella enter the Alhambra. They walk through its marble halls, amazed by its perfection. The filigree of stucco, the mirrored pools, the ceilings shaped like stars. Isabella whispers, "This place is heaven on earth." Ferdinand nods. "Then it is fitting that we have taken it in God's name." Outside, a great cross is raised on the highest tower. A cannon thunders in salute. The Reconquista is over. The last kingdom of Al-Andalus has fallen. In that instant, Spain is born. Not the Spain of poets and explorers yet, but of faith, unity, and unrelenting certainty. The world shifts on its axis. The sound of the cheering fades, carried by the wind into the mountains, where a young exile rides away, clutching the last memory of paradise. The smoke of victory still drifts over Granada when the world begins to change again. The year is 1492, and for the first time in living memory, the entire Iberian Peninsula bows to one flag, one crown, one faith. You walk through the streets of Granada in the days after the surrender, a city half in mourning, half in disbelief. The air smells of incense and iron. Church bells toll where the muezzin's call once rose. The fountains still flow, but the sound feels different now, less like music, more like memory. Ferdinand and Isabella move quickly. They are not conquerors who linger to admire. They are architects reshaping the world. In the first weeks, they issue decrees. No looting, no desecration, no forced conversions. Yet, their image must be one of divine order. The treaty Boabdil signed, known as the Capitulations of Granada, guarantees Muslims the right to keep their religion, their property, even their judges. It is a piece of parchment, not of hearts, but it buys time. The Catholic monarchs enter the Alhambra formally on Epiphany Day. The royal procession climbs the hill as sunlight strikes the palace's red walls. Choirs sing hymns in Latin, the same rhythms that once echoed in Arabic. Ferdinand, ever practical, admires the fortress's strategic perfection. Isabella, moved to tears, kneels in the Court of Lions and prays aloud, "Lord, you have completed the work begun by your servants." Around her, priests sprinkle holy water on marble that once bore verses from the Quran. The Alhambra becomes both trophy and altar. But even amid triumph, there is tension. The soldiers grow restless, hungry for plunder that never comes. Priests whisper that the Muslims' faith is too stubborn, too dangerous to be left alive. The ink on the treaty has barely dried when the pressure to Christianize begins. At first it is gentle persuasion. Then it becomes sermons, then baptisms, then edicts. Granada's people, exhausted by siege and famine, accept what they must. Many convert in name only. Moriscos they are called, little Moors. They still speak Arabic in secret, still wash before prayer, still whisper Allahu Akbar when thunder rolls. The Inquisition will come for them later. For now, the city wears its submission like a mask. Boabdil and his family are escorted safely out of the city as agreed. His destination, the Alpujarras Mountains, then North Africa. His departure is silent. The people watch from behind shutters as their last sultan rides away flanked by Spanish guards. Some weep, some spit, most simply stare. He has become a ghost before he's even gone. In his absence, the transformation accelerates. The great mosque of Granada becomes the Church of St. Mary. Qur'ans are confiscated. Arabic is banned from public use. Priests bless the river Genil, as if baptizing the land itself. The past is washed away by ritual and decree. But the Alhambra resists in its own quiet way. Its walls, covered in verses praising God, remain untouched. Perhaps even the conquerors fear to scar such beauty. Scholars, soldiers, even priests wander its courtyards in awe. How could infidels build such a paradise? One confessor murmurs. Another replies, they built it so that we might one day claim it. Isabella orders chroniclers to record the fall of Granada in detail. Artists paint the surrender. Ferdinand calm, Isabella radiant, Boabdil humble. The scene becomes legend before the ink dries. Yet in the margins of those chronicles, a few scribes write notes that never make it into the official histories. The quiet dignity of the defeated, the tears of the city's women, the silence of its poets. And then, as if history can't resist irony, a new chapter begins even before the old one cools. That same month, in the same Alhambra, the Catholic monarchs sign another document, one commissioning a Genoese navigator named Christopher Columbus to seek a western route to the Indies. The ink of conquest has barely dried, and already they dream of new worlds. The fall of one paradise births the pursuit of another. Meanwhile, Granada adjusts to its new life. Markets reopen. Soldiers leave for other wars. The people rebuild what they can. But under the surface the grief remains, a quiet ache in the stones themselves. The fountains murmur verses no one remembers. The walls of the Alhambra seem to sigh when the wind passes through. At night, when the city sleeps, you can almost imagine the ghost of Boabdil walking the courtyards, his footsteps soft on the marble. He pauses by the lion fountain, staring into the water. The reflection that stares back at him is not a king, not a conqueror, but the last ember of a civilization that once illuminated the world. Spain has won, Islam has fallen, but history, as always, keeps both in its shadow. The bells of Granada ring through the winter of 1492, their sound carrying across the mountains that once sheltered rebellion. The city has changed, yet not entirely. You walk through the Albaycin, its white houses still clinging to the hillsides, the scent of bread and smoke winding through its alleys. Children play by fountains that whisper in two languages, the old and the new. The war is over, but the silence that follows feels heavier than battle. Ferdinand and Isabella rule now as sovereigns of all Spain. Their portraits hang in the council halls, their seals mark every decree, and their names are spoken in mass as if divine. The people whisper, La Reina y el Rey Católicos with awe, the Queen and King anointed by God himself. The priests preach that Granada's fall was not conquest but cleansing, a final triumph of faith. For the victors, the story is already legend. For the vanquished, it is a wound still open. The terms of surrender, generous on parchment, begin to unravel in practice. The Muslim elite who swore loyalty soon find their privileges shrinking. Their judges are replaced by Christian magistrates. The Arabic script disappears from documents, replaced by Latin signatures. The muftis who once interpreted law now hide their scrolls or flee across the sea. Ferdinand, pragmatic as ever, wants stability, taxes, trade, quiet obedience. Isabella, driven by devotion, wants something more, salvation. To her, souls are territory. She summons the clergy of Castile and charges them with the conversion of Granada's people. "Let there be no more twilight," she says. "Spain shall be one faith under one crown." At first, the priests approach with patience. They preach in the plazas, translating the Gospels into Arabic. They hold debates in the old madrasas, comparing Jesus and the prophets. Some Moors listen, curious. Others nod politely and walk away. But for many, the faith of their ancestors is too deep to abandon. Then comes Cardinal Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros, a man of iron spirit and no taste for half measures. Where Isabella sees souls to be saved, Cisneros sees heresy to be purged. He burns Qurans in public squares, forces conversions through threats and imprisonment, and declares baptism the only door to peace. Granada's fragile trust collapses overnight. In 1499, revolt flares in the Albaycin. The narrow streets become battlefields. Christians barricade their homes, Moors take to the rooftops. It is chaos, brief, desperate, doomed. The rebellion fails and the punishment is swift. The capitulations of Granada, that last promise of tolerance, are torn apart in spirit if not in law. Conversion becomes mandatory, Islam outlawed, Arabic forbidden. The sound of the call to prayer vanishes like a voice swallowed by wind. Boabdil, across the sea in Fez, hears the news. He grows thin and quiet, haunted by guilt. Some say he tries to rally support to retake Granada. Others claim he never speaks of Spain again. One chronicler writes, "He died remembering the colour of the Alhambra at sunset." Back in Spain, Isabella oversees the next phase of her divine mission. In March 1492, the same year she took Granada, she signs the Edict of Expulsion. All Jews in her realm must convert or leave within 4 months. Centuries of scholarship, trade, and artistry vanish overnight. Synagogues empty, libraries close, ships fill with exiles bound for unknown shores. Spain purges its diversity in the name of purity. Yet the same summer, Columbus sails west under the same monarch's flag, carrying their ambition across the ocean. As one world ends, another begins. The fall of Granada becomes the hinge of an age. One door closing on medieval tolerance, another opening onto global empire. And still, the Alhambra endures. Its walls, carved with verses in praise of God, survive untouched. Even Ferdinand refuses to deface them. Perhaps he senses that beauty this perfect belongs to eternity, not ideology. The palace remains silent but defiant, a testament to the lost brilliance of Al-Andalus. The courtyards still shimmer with reflections of sky and water, as if time itself pauses there out of reverence. At dusk, as priests chant vespers in the converted mosques, the wind from the Sierra Nevada carries faint echoes of older prayers, not words, but the cadence of devotion. The city listens, though it pretends not to hear. Granada has become something new, not Moorish, not Christian, but haunted. A city made of longing, built on the memory of paradise lost. The Catholic monarchs have achieved their dream. One Spain, one cross, one crown, yet in their triumph lies the seed of contradiction. Unity through erasure, holiness through exile, peace through silence. The Reconquista is complete, but the echo of what it destroyed still hums beneath the marble. And if you stand tonight in the courtyard of the Alhambra, under its 1,000 carved arches, you might swear that the water still murmurs in Arabic, soft, sorrowful, and eternal. Granada does not die, it transforms. The years pass, and the city, once the final citadel of Islam in Europe, becomes a jewel in the Catholic crown. The Christian architects who arrive to purify the Alhambra hesitate when they see it. Even they can feel it. This place is a poem written in stone. They add chapels and royal apartments, but dare not tear down the arches or silence the fountains. Faith may have changed, but beauty remains a kind of resistance. You walk through its halls in the early 1500s. Sunlight filters through latticed windows, dappling the floors with shifting patterns that look like prayer rugs. Priests stroll beneath ceilings carved like honeycombs. whispering psalms where once imams chanted the adhan. It is a strange harmony, not peace, but coexistence through awe. Down in the city, life resumes its rhythm. The markets fill again with spices, dyes, and silver from the Americas. Spanish merchants now trade in coins stamped with both the Christian cross and Arabic geometric motifs. Because art survives where politics divides. The people of Granada, now Moriscos, converts in name but not in heart, adapt. They pray in private, read scriptures in secret, and teach their children Arabic under the guise of Latin lessons. The city learns the art of silence. In 1502, a royal decree arrives. The Muslims of Castile are ordered to convert or leave. In theory, the choice exists. In practice, there is none. The ports are closed, the frontiers watched. Priests go door to door, carrying fonts of holy water. Whole families bow their heads and accept baptism. Their names changed overnight. Yusuf becomes Jose, Fatima becomes Catalina. Their faiths are drowned, but their memories float. The Inquisition grows bolder. Its agents arrive in Granada to ensure that the conversions are sincere. They listen for Arabic words spoken in homes, for candles lit on the wrong nights, for bread baked without the sign of the cross. Confessions are extracted, not freely given. Those who resist are punished, not for rebellion, but for remembering. Yet the Moriscos endure. They keep fragments of their heritage hidden in songs and stories. A lullaby hummed by a mother still carries the rhythm of old Arabic verse. The tiling in a new church accidentally forms the same geometry as a mosque floor. Even the recipes, almonds, saffron, honey, taste of memory. History, like water, seeps through every crack. Far away, Ferdinand and Isabella's Spain blooms into empire. Columbus's voyage, launched from the same Alhambra where Granada's fate was sealed, brings gold and glory across the ocean. Seville becomes rich, Madrid rises as a capital, and Spain calls itself the heart of the world. But beneath the splendour runs a shadow. The more Spain builds its empire abroad, the more it erases the one that lived inside it. By the mid-1500s, Granada grows restless again. The Moriscos, crushed under new taxes and forbidden customs, begin to whisper of revolt. They meet in cellars, in mountain caves, in olive groves, fragments of a people refusing extinction. Priests warn the crown that leniency breeds heresy. Soldiers are sent to patrol the Alpujarras. The peace Ferdinand and Isabella promised has long turned to surveillance. Then, in 1568, long after the monarchs are dust, the simmering anger boils over. The Alpujarras rebellion erupts. Moriscos rise against Spanish rule, shouting for Allah and freedom. For a brief moment, the mountains blaze with defiance. But Spain's armies descend, relentless as always. The rebellion is crushed, villages burned, survivors scattered. The last echo of Muslim resistance in Spain vanishes into smoke. When it ends, the survivors are forced north, exiled into other provinces, their language banned forever. The Alhambra, that eternal witness, stands untouched but emptier than before. No more prayers rise beneath its arches, no more kings walk its halls. Only wind, birds, and the faint trickle of fountains remain. A chronicler in Madrid writes smugly, "Thus ended the Moorish contagion." But in Granada itself, another hand scribbles a quiet correction in the margin. No, thus began our forgetting. The centuries roll on. Monarchs come and go, empires rise and fade, but the Alhambra endures, scarred, silent, luminous. Tourists, painters, and poets rediscover it, calling it the Lost Paradise. They see beauty. They do not see loss. Yet if you walk there at dusk, when the marble glows red and the fountains murmur like tired hearts, you might still feel it, the weight of a vanished world pressing through the walls. You might even hear the faint echo of a voice whispering, "There is no conqueror but God." It isn't defiance, it's remembrance. The Alhambra sleeps under centuries of dust, its arches weathered, its fountains whispering to ghosts. By the 1600s, Granada has settled into an uneasy stillness, a city of churches built on mosques, of Christians who unknowingly carry Moorish blood in their veins. The past lingers here like a fragrance, faint but impossible to erase. Spain, meanwhile, has become an empire of oceans. Its galleons carry silver from the New World. Its kings rule lands where the sun never sets. Yet the glory abroad casts long shadows at home. The wealth that once poured into Madrid begins to drain away through war, debt and pride. The empire grows brittle. Its gold cannot hide the hollowness left by what it destroyed. The thinkers, the artisans, the poets who once filled cities like Granada with light. You walk through the city's narrow streets, now quieter, emptier. The great Muslim families are gone, replaced by Castilian nobles who build mansions atop old foundations. The courtyards still shimmer with water and tiles, but the patterns have lost their language. Children play beside fountains carved with Quranic verses they can't read. Beauty survives as ornament, not as memory. In 1609, King Philip III signs the final decree of expulsion, the last blow of a centuries-long cleansing. All remaining Moriscos, even those long converted, must leave Spain within months. They have lived here for generations, fought in Spain's wars, paid its taxes, tilled its soil, and now they are foreigners in their own land. Granada mourns quietly. Families pack what little they can carry, manuscripts, heirlooms, keys to houses they'll never see again. They board ships at Cartagena and Almeria, bound for North Africa. As the sails fill with wind, many turn for one last glimpse of the mountains. The peaks of the Sierra Nevada glow white against the sky, eternal, indifferent. The same mountains that once shielded their ancestors now watch them vanish. The city they leave behind feels emptier than ever. Churches ring their bells in thanksgiving, but the echoes sound hollow. The orchards go untended. The craftsmanship of Granada, the silks, ceramics, music, begins to fade. Spain gains purity but loses soul, and yet the Alhambra endures. Its marble doesn't care who rules, who prays, who forgets. It waits, timeless and patient. Ivy creeps over its walls. Bats nest in its towers. Rain seeps through its domes. The fountains still flow, though slower now, their rhythm softer, like breathing in sleep. Occasionally travellers pass through. Italian artists sketch its ruins, calling it a palace of dreams. Poets write verses about the sorrow of its silence. Even the conqueror's descendants feel its gravity. A Jesuit scholar visiting in 1650 writes, "This fortress is a sermon in stone, teaching humility to victors." Meanwhile, the empire falters. Spain loses wars, loses colonies, loses direction. The wealth of America slips away, and the heart of power grows tired. It's as if the spirit of the Alhambra, the reminder that nothing endures forever, has seeped into the nation's bones. By the 18th century, Granada has become a provincial shadow, its glory remembered only in song and myth. The Alhambra decays, a ghost of itself, its marble cracked, its mosaics fading. Locals say the palace is haunted by Moorish spirits. Children dare each other to enter its halls after dark. Inside, the wind hums through the lattice windows, whispering fragments of forgotten prayers. Then, in 1829, a visitor arrives who will wake the ghosts again, an American writer named Washington Irving. He takes residence in one of the Alhambra's old chambers, listens to the fountains and writes tales of the Alhambra. His words carry the palace's beauty and sorrow to the world. For the first time in centuries, the Alhambra becomes not a ruin but a legend. Artists, scholars, and dreamers follow. Painters capture its courtyards in watercolour. Architects study its geometry. Poets call it the soul of Spain. Granada's long silence breaks, not with swords or sermons, but with wonder. The city slowly revives, not as a capital of power, but as a sanctuary of memory. The past no longer threatens, it inspires. The same Spain that once tried to bury its Moorish legacy begins to celebrate it. The Alhambra becomes its greatest treasure, a reminder that beauty survives conquest, that time forgives what ideology cannot. At sunset, when the walls glow red and the Sierra Nevada turns violet, you can still hear the echo of water and footsteps, of whispers that sound like prayers. The city no longer belongs to kings or priests. It belongs to history itself. And the fountains keep flowing, as if to say, all empires fall, but art remembers. By the dawn of the 19th century, Granada's quiet grandeur begins to awaken once more. The Alhambra, long abandoned to ivy and silence, draws the curious from far beyond Spain's fading borders. Romantic travellers from England, France and America come in carriages over the dusty roads, chasing the ruins of Moorish legend. They find not just architecture but atmosphere, a palace that seems alive, breathing through its shadows and fountains. You walk with them through the Court of Lions, where the marble still gleams under centuries of dust. The lions' faces are worn smooth, their water still flows in perfect rhythm. Sunlight ripples through the arches, and the air hums faintly with echoes, whispers in Arabic, Latin, and Castilian layered like music. The travellers stop, struck dumb by beauty. How strange, one murmurs, that a conquered people built the most eternal thing in Spain. In 1832, Washington Irving publishes Tales of the Alhambra, and suddenly the world falls in love again with Granada. His words cast a spell, a blend of myth, melancholy, and marvel. He writes of hidden treasure, ghostly Moorish kings, secret lovers, and poets who still walk in moonlight. He calls the Alhambra a fragile vision that must be protected from time. His book turns the palace into a dream, and the dream draws pilgrims. Granada changes because of it. Painters arrive, Delacroix, Lewis, and Fortuny, capturing its red towers in watercolour and oil. Scholars come to study its geometry, its calligraphy, its light. Architects begin to copy its designs for palaces in London, Paris, and even New York. What was once a symbol of loss becomes a muse for the modern age. Spain, emerging from its own wars and revolutions, begins to rediscover the value of what it tried to erase. The Alhambra becomes national heritage, its restoration declared a patriotic duty. Craftsmen from across Andalusia are brought to mend tiles, clean inscriptions and rebuild fountains. Each stroke of work uncovers not just stone, but memory. And yet, beneath the romantic fascination, there lingers unease. Tourists speak of Moorish beauty, but rarely of Moorish tragedy. The story of Granada is told as fairy tale, not elegy. The ghosts of the Nasrids are repackaged into souvenirs. History becomes spectacle. You can almost hear Boabdil sighing somewhere beyond the arches, not in anger, but in irony. The poets of Spain's new century, though, remember. Federico Garcia Lorca, a child of Granada, grows up wandering the Alhambra's gardens, listening to its fountains whisper. His verses capture what tourists cannot: the sorrow, the blood beneath the roses. Granada, he writes, is the wound that never heals. He sees the palace not as ruin or ornament, but as soul, the last heartbeat of a civilization too beautiful to last. As the decades roll on, Granada becomes a crossroads again, not of armies this time, but of cultures and memory. Scholars uncover Arabic manuscripts buried for centuries. Scientists study the palace's acoustics. Mathematicians marvel at its symmetry. The Alhambra proves to be not just art, but science. Geometry turned divine. Every arch, every pattern, every ratio whispers of intellect as much as inspiration. The Spanish Civil War comes and goes. Bombs fall elsewhere, but Granada is spared, as if the past itself shields it. The Alhambra endures once more, watching kings fall, republics rise, generals seize power and fade away. Its stones outlive ideologies. In the 20th century the tourists return, now with cameras and guidebooks seeking not relics but reflections. They gaze into the reflecting pools of the Court of Myrtles, seeing their own faces shimmer beside carved words from the Quran. Some understand the irony, most just take the picture. The fountains continue to murmur anyway, repeating the same quiet refrain. Beauty survives everything. At night, the palace glows under soft amber lights. The Sierra Nevada looms pale and silent behind it. In the cool air, the scent of cypress and water mingles, the same scent Boabdil breathed 500 years before. The city below hums with music and laughter. Life has returned, unafraid. And yet, for all its rebirth, Granada never forgets what it was. The Alhambra remains both wound and wonder, a monument not to conquest or faith, but to endurance. The Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, all their stories flow together here, like the water in its fountains, merging into something that transcends victory and defeat. You sit in the courtyard as the moon rises, and for a moment it feels as though time itself pauses. The arches glow silver, the water ripples like breath, and the walls seem to whisper the same phrase written into their very bones. Wala ghalib illallah. There is no conqueror but God. And you realize that after all the wars, all the crowns, all the centuries, that truth was never conquest. It was survival. The modern age arrives, and still the Alhambra stands, timeless, untouchable, patient. Airplanes hum above it now, not war drums. Electric lights glow along the same walls once lit by oil lamps. You stand again in its courtyards, where centuries seem to blur together. The whisper of Arabic verses mixing with the footsteps of tourists in sneakers, cameras flashing where kings once prayed. The empire of Islam is gone. The empire of Spain long faded, yet both somehow linger in the stillness of this place. Granada has become a living palimpsest, layer upon layer of history written, erased, and written again. The Catholic cathedrals stand shoulder to shoulder with the remains of mosques. Tapas bars overlook streets named for emirs and poets. The city's voice is no longer one tongue but many. Castilian, Arabic, English, all weaving through the same air. The Alhambra itself is now the most visited monument in Spain. Millions come every year to walk its marble floors and stare up at the vaulted ceilings that seem to float on air. Guides explain the architecture, the perfect geometry, the hidden codes of symmetry, the way the light moves like a living thing through latticework and tile. Scientists study the ratios, artists study the rhythm, architects try to replicate its secrets but never quite succeed. What none of them can quantify is its silence, that peculiar living hush that clings to the air between fountains, like the breath of a memory refusing to die. Granada thrives on that silence now. It fuels its identity, its art, its pride. The city that once fell by fire now survives by story. Street musicians play Andalusian lutes beside ancient walls. Flamenco dancers echo the same passion once heard in Moorish songs. Even the modern cathedral bells ring with something of the old call to prayer, not in faith, but in rhythm. The Alhambra has become both museum and mirror. Scholars debate whether to call it Islamic, Spanish, or universal. None of those words feel quite right. It is all of them, and none. A bridge between worlds that refuse to stay divided. Yet for all its beauty, the story still aches. The tourists walk where Boabdil once walked, where Aïxa wept, where Ferdinand and Isabella prayed in triumph. Few remember that it was hunger and betrayal that opened these gates. Fewer still remember the thousands who sailed away, their ships lost to storms or pirates or history itself. The storytellers and poets remember, though. They always do. On certain nights, the locals say, when the moon is high and the courtyards are empty, the fountains whisper their names, Aïxa, Boabdil, Muli Hassan. The water carries them like verses from a forgotten prayer. The guards who work the night shift shrug and laugh about it. But some admit that the sound of running water sometimes feels almost like a sigh. You walk again through the Hall of the Ambassadors, the same hall where Boabdil once debated his fate. The air smells faintly of cedar and age. The ceiling still glitters with 8,000 carved stars, each one a tiny echo of heaven. You look up, and for a moment you can almost see him there, the last Sultan of Granada, standing beneath the same stars, holding the same weight in his chest, the burden of memory, the ache of loss, the quiet dignity of knowing he witnessed the end of something extraordinary. Spain, for all its modernity, still bears his shadow. The descendants of those who left in 1492 have returned as visitors, scholars, artists. They come from Morocco, Egypt, Syria and Turkey, walking the same paths their ancestors fled. Some weep when they see the palace, others smile, recognizing patterns carved by hands that shared their blood. History, it seems, circles back when it has something left to say. Granada today hums with life again. Cafes buzzing, trams clattering, music echoing through alleys. that once carried the sound of Arabic poetry. And above it all, the Alhambra watches, eternal and unbothered, its walls glowing red at sunset as they always have. The old saying returns: the world is a bridge, cross it, but do not build your house upon it. Maybe that's what the Alhambra has always known. It doesn't resist time, it dances with it. As twilight deepens, the muezzin's call no longer rises, but the fountains still murmur their soft reply. The city lights flicker below, the mountains shimmer beyond, and for a moment you feel as though all of history, the rise, the fall, the pain, the beauty, has folded into a single breath. Granada endures not because it forgot its past, but because it learned to live beside it. And in that endurance, the ghosts of Al-Andalus rest, not defeated, not triumphant, simply remembered. The air above Granada glows gold and rose as evening settles over the city that once changed the world. You stand on the terrace of the Alhambra, looking out over rooftops tiled like waves, the distant plains of the Vega shimmering under the dying sun. Somewhere below, a guitarist plays softly, a melody that feels both ancient and new, like the city itself. It's hard to imagine now that this piece was born from siege and surrender. Granada has become a paradox, a monument to loss that teaches endurance, a city once conquered by faith now liberated by memory. The scars of history have turned into patterns of light. Inside the Alhambra, restoration continues endlessly. Craftsmen brush centuries of dust from tiles, trace fading calligraphy with trembling hands, and repair arches that have stood longer than most nations. Each stroke of their work feels like an act of apology, a human gesture toward what time and conquest broke. No one owns this beauty anymore, they merely keep it alive. Tourists shuffle through the palace every day, listening to guides who tell stories softened by time. They hear about Boabdil's tears, Ferdinand's banners, Isabella's prayers. They nod, take photos, move on. But if they pause, just for a heartbeat, they might notice something deeper. The rhythm of water beneath the chatter, the way light moves like breath across the walls, the sense that this place is not a relic, but a witness. Outside, Granada thrives again, a blend of flamenco and faith, of tapas and tradition, of Andalusian sunlight that never quite forgets the moonlight of Al-Andalus. The people live easily with contradiction now. In the Albaycin, families with Spanish surnames still cook with saffron and almonds, still hum songs with Arabic cadences. In the cafes, students debate philosophy beside fountains built by men who spoke in a language their textbooks call extinct. The past is no longer a ghost here, it's a neighbour, and yet even in peace, the Alhambra reminds you of impermanence. Its beauty is fragile, its meaning fluid. Wars, empires, religions, all pass through, leaving echoes. It's a place that humbles even pride. Every conqueror who walked these halls thought they were eternal. Every one of them left as dust. From the towers, the view stretches endlessly. Olive groves, white villages, the snow peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Once those mountains were the border between Christendom and Islam. Now they're just mountains, silent, ancient, unconcerned. The wind that rushes down from them carries the same chill Boabdil felt when he turned for his last look. But history's cruelty has softened into melancholy, and melancholy into art. Granada no longer grieves, it remembers. It turns pain into music, exile into poetry, loss into light. Federico Garcia Lorca's words still drift through its plazas. In Granada, every shadow has a soul. As night deepens, the palace lights up. The arches gleam like gold. The fountains shimmer silver. Somewhere inside, a caretaker sweeps dust from the tiles, dust from centuries of footsteps. You can almost imagine the ghosts passing each other in the corridors, a sultan in silk, a queen in prayer, a poet with ink-stained hands. None speak. They simply exist together, reconciled at last by time, and as you stand there, you realize the story of Granada was never just about conquest or faith or empire. It's about what outlives them. The Alhambra still whispers the same phrase carved into its heart. There is no conqueror but God. Not a cry of defeat, but a truth older than history. that no man, no king, no faith, no nation endures forever, only beauty and remembrance do. Granada has learned what the rest of the world keeps forgetting, that what falls can rise again, not in power, but in meaning, that what is lost can still sing, that the past, if held gently, can become peace. The guitarist below changes songs. The sound drifts up through the warm air, a melody older than both mosque and cathedral. The lights of the city flicker, the fountains keep murmuring, and somewhere between them, in the hush between worlds, the story continues, quietly, beautifully, endlessly. It's night now in Granada. The air is soft, almost liquid, carrying the scent of orange blossom and cool stone. You walk through the quiet courtyards of the Alhambra, your footsteps muffled by centuries of memory. The tourists are gone, the lights dimmed, the fountains speaking only to themselves. The stars shimmer above the arches, their light weaving through the lattice windows just as it did 500 years ago. The palace is awake, but dreaming. You pause by the Court of the Lions. The marble still glistens, the water still flows in perfect rhythm. The same symmetry that once symbolized divine order now feels like a heartbeat. Each drip, each ripple seems to carry a word. Remember, remember, remember. It's strange. This place was built for kings, lost to conquerors, revived by poets, and now belongs to everyone. It has outlived faith and empire alike, outlasted armies and ideology. The sultans are gone, the monarch's dust, yet the fountain still runs, steady and forgiving. Maybe that's what eternity really is, not unbroken power, but unbroken beauty. You look up at the arches, where verses still gleam in faded gold. There is no conqueror but God, is not defiance anymore, it's peace. After everything, the sieges, the prayers, the betrayals, the tears, those words no longer separate the victors from the vanquished. They belong to everyone who ever stood here and dared to build something meant to last. Below, the city hums faintly. Laughter in the Albayzin, guitar strings in the distance, the gentle murmur of life continuing. Granada has learned to live with its ghosts. The Christians built their cathedrals, the Muslims left their patterns, the Jews their songs, and somehow all of it still breathes in the same air. This is no longer the story of loss. It's the story of survival through beauty. You wander through the hall of the ambassadors one last time. Moonlight spills across the tiled floor, glinting off the walls like starlight caught in stone. You think of Boabdil standing here on the morning of surrender, of Aixa whispering her hard truth, of Ferdinand and Isabella claiming victory beneath the same stars. And now, centuries later, it feels different, softer, smaller. Time has taken away the noise, the pride, the politics, and left only quiet. History, it seems, is not a wound to be healed, but a rhythm to be heard. The Alhambra teaches that, not through sermons or statues, but through silence, symmetry, and patience. It whispers that empires fall, faiths fade, names vanish, yet the things built in reverence, in beauty, in longing endure. You move toward the final archway, where the night air cools your skin. The city lights shimmer below like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, Boabdil's last breath still lingers in the wind, mingling with the laughter of children who no longer remember his name. Perhaps that is mercy, not to be forgotten, but to be absorbed into the rhythm of life. The fountains murmur one final time, as if closing a story that never really ends. The water runs, the walls breathe, the stars shimmer. Granada sleeps, but the Alhambra dreams for it, endlessly, softly, eternally. So you stand there, between the living and the remembered, and whisper the last line that history left carved in stone. There is no conqueror but God. And for once, it sounds like a lullaby. The palace grows quiet now. The stars drift higher, and the last echoes of footsteps fade into the marble. You can almost hear the heartbeat of the city beneath the stillness. Slow, steady, content. The fountains breathe in rhythm with you, the night air soft against your skin. Granada has stopped mourning. Its grief has turned to calm. The Alhambra, that dream of red stone and water, no longer belongs to kings or conquerors. It belongs to time. Every ripple in its pools carries a memory, every carved verse a prayer long answered. You picture the city below, lanterns glowing in the Albaicin, laughter spilling from cafes, the scent of bread and jasmine rising through the dark. The same streets that once trembled with war now hum with peace. It's strange how endings become beginnings when enough centuries pass. The fall of Granada wasn't the death of a world, it was its transformation. From sword to song, from empire to echo, from loss to legend. Close your eyes and listen. The fountains murmur softly, the wind sighs through the arches, and the moon paints silver across the marble. The story has settled, the voices of history fading into a single breath. The city sleeps beneath its own reflection now, dreaming not of conquest, but of quiet. The past is at peace, and so are you. Sleep well, traveller of time. The water keeps flowing, the light keeps shifting, and the Alhambra, patient, eternal, keeps watch. Good night. Sweet dreams.